Hello, good evening. I am Dr. Amitabh Banerjee. I am the author of Pandemic A Third Eye. And as I have started narrating each chapter to highlight the main concepts, because some of the terms are technical, though these columns were written for the mass audience, but still there are certain insights and certain additional commentaries based as an afterthought as events unfolded. So yesterday we discussed chapter 1. Today I will be discussing chapter 2. The title is Second Thoughts on Mass Vaccination. The COVID-19 pandemic, there were certain unprecedented public health measures. One was the lockdown. Almost all the countries uh, implemented lockdown, school closures, business closures, and the second unprecedented public health intervention was vaccination at warp speed, development of vaccine and deployment of vaccine at a super fast speed. So I have summarized the concept of this chapter as the vaccination without monitoring, surveillance, and countrywide zero survey is not helpful. It is like running a super-fast train on old rickety tracks. The vaccine is a powerful weapon and needs to be deployed strategically. I have started the chapter with a statement or with a attitude taken by Elon Musk, who had famously remarked at the before the vaccine was being at the time when the vaccine was being developed, he had remarked that he and his family would not take the COVID-19 vaccine. And I had said that coming from a celebrity, multi-billionaire and entrepreneur, such a statement is likely to promote vaccine hesitancy among many. So I was not in favor of either extremes to completely discount the vaccines. And on the other hand, I was also not for blindly going for the vaccines. I have mentioned here. On the other hand, the unprecedented second wave with reports of a scarcity of oxygen hospital beds led to desperation among the masses who believe that mass vaccination will halt the pandemic in its tracks. This was evident from the crowds at the vaccination centers and frequent crashing of the COVID application, digital application for registration for vaccines, the online site for registration, both extreme positions. That is outright rejection of vaccine by public figures on one hand, and on the other, craze to get vaccinated by the masses can adversely affect the fight against any pandemic. Of course, Elon Musk also subsequently, and though he had given a statement early that he would not take the vaccine and neither his family members, he had taken the vaccine subsequently. And after some recent, he had also tweeted that he had suffered from side effects from the vaccine. So that's another story. So I had proposed that vaccine is a strong and powerful weapon against the novel coronavirus, a marvel of modern precision and genomic technology. One should appreciate that. And but like all strong weapons, it should neither be withheld nor used indiscriminately, but should be deployed strategically to derive maximum benefit in a cost-effective way. The generals, I have compared it to a military operations, fighting a pandemic, since they declared war on pandemics. So even in a military operation, generals of the war against the pandemic should be conversant with the benefits as well as the hazards of this artillery, the vaccine. I compared the vaccine with artillery, and I quoted Sun Tzu, the ancient philosopher warrior of China. In his Art of War, he says, therefore, those who are not thoroughly aware of the disadvantages in the use of arms cannot be thoroughly aware of the advantages in the use of arms. So a person who doesn't know a disadvantage of a strong weapon, like the vaccine in this case, wouldn't know how to use it best also. And that is what subsequent events have brought out. Sun Tzu, ironically, was a Chinese general around 500 BC whose treatise The Art of War influences military thinking and strategy to this day. Might as well apply his strategy to combat a virus which originated in his homeland, China. This was like a good general, we should have preserved or ammunition the vaccine. A good military commander surveys the lay of the land before deploying his heavy ammunition, the artillery. I compared the vaccine with the artillery. Using this analogy, we should have been guided by your logistics and epidemiological data to prioritize vaccination rather than opening vaccine for all during early stages of the pandemic. Fighting on all fronts simultaneously drains the army of health workers and resources, and with a leaky vaccine. Vaccine was leaky, and subsequently it was confirmed it was a leaky vaccine. Hardly has an impact given a large population, particularly in the Indian context. The vaccine, the natural virus spread much faster than the vaccine. So it was just duplication nature's efforts. By the time we rolled out the vaccine, majority of the people had developed natural immunity. Regrettably, nobody paid heed to these ground realities, in spite of occasional sane counsel by national experts. Head of Operations Research at Indian Council of Medical Research, Dr. Arora, wrote an opinion piece dated April 12, 2021 in the Times of India. In April 2021, Dr. N. Arora had written an opinion in Times of India saying that opening up vaccines for younger adults right now will be a gamble with lives. What an irony. He went on to explain the logistic challenges and the science behind the strategy. He stated that it would have made perfect sense to vaccinate all adults if we lived in an utopia with infinite resources. However, the reality was that we were in the midst of a raging pandemic with finite supplies of vaccines. The aim was to reduce deaths and hospitalization from the infection. There was limited evidence that current vaccine can interrupt transmission. He said this in April 2021, that there is no evidence that vaccine can interrupt transmission. Young adults without comorbidities rarely landed up in hospital or died from the infection. So true. So vaccinating young adults will not be the cost effective, and it can have side effects also. Even one young adult, healthy adult dying from an adverse event of the vaccine is one too many, because when they are not at risk at all, and he had mentioned it. So vaccinating young adults will not be cost effective. What needed to be done was to prevent deaths, the majority of which occurred in older age groups. That is what makes epidemiological sense also. Risk approach. And the data was already there that young people were negligible risk, healthy young people were zero risk. So why forget about side effect? Why spend so much money? Because we Indians, demographic, we have a very young population. 97% of our population are below 70 years. Young people, mass vaccination is not cost effective. Dr. Arora also warned about the possibility of emergence of mutant strains as a result of mass and indiscriminate vaccine campaigns. New mutants coming out, like we get antibiotic resistance or vaccine resistance and mutations. That is a biological phenomena. Made perfect sense. However, subsequent events indicate little heed was paid to logic and science in this pandemic. Within a couple of weeks of this recommendation, many state governments announced vaccination of all adults over 18 years, some even declaring it free, playing to the gallery. A barely concealed example of populist demagoguery. Any opposition to this ostensibly welfare measure was labeled as vaccine hesitancy. It was stigmatized. Bureaucrats and scientific advisors to the government were afraid to be stigmatized thus, and fearing repercussions tended to remain silent. Groupthink prevailed in this environment, and all felt secure on this bandwagon. Ironically, later in this pandemic, even Dr. Arora overruled the reservations of the National Technical Advisory of Government of India, NTAGI, regarding vaccination for children. Entagi did not recommend vaccination for young people. He overruled it. When he had himself given a statement in April that it is not cost effective, it is not scientific, but he overruled it. We don't know what are the reasons. Maybe he had more evidence, which we don't know. Perfect example of, unfortunately, remarkable scientific progress like precision medicine and genomics, which steered vaccine development in record time, deprived the proponents of these and the public of common sense. When you are so brilliant, common sense, I think, disappears. It got worse when market forces entered the picture. Vaccine investment was huge. And Woody Allen says in Annie Hall, to quote Woody Allen, he says, that's the thing with intellectuals. They can be absolutely brilliant, but still have no idea what is going on. Exactly this thing happened in the pandemic. Many brilliant scientists also did not know the ground situation, did not know that the majority of the people, or even if they were given the results that majority have seropositive, they have got natural immunity. We knew since ages that natural immunity is stronger than vaccine. And even then, brilliant people did not know what is going on. Mass vaccination was promoted like it would end everything. It would end the pandemic. Due to the vicious pace of the second wave and subsequently the latest variant Omicron, by the time all this was going on, the Omicron ran amok in our country. And again, there was a big panic of Omicron when it was already obvious that it was um, very mild. It was hardly causing hospitalization, it was hardly causing deaths. It was acting as nature's vaccine. But still, and became clear that mass vaccination of the population will not catch up with the pace of natural infection among our population, particular dense population. And most of these infections were asymptomatic or mild, particularly Omicron. Against this landscape, it was wasteful use of resources to go for mass scale population vaccination in a country for a disease which had very low consequences for the young and healthy. According to the third round of Sero survey, which occurred by the end of the first wave, more than around 25% of our population had already encountered the virus during the first wave. And the second wave was so fast and so widespread that it was estimated more than 50% or 60% would have got the infection. And as it was found by the end of the second wave, about 70% of our population reached some level of population immunity due to natural infection as revealed by Sero survey. ICMR Sero survey itself has revealed that end of second wave, when vaccination coverage was just 5%, more than 70% of our people had already got the natural immunity after recovery from natural infection. So there was no reason to go for mass vaccination. At least, I mean, at the most, we could have just reserved it for the elderly and those who were high risk. And of course, subsequently, when in the Supreme Court, the government affidavit mentioned that there was not, it wasn't compulsory, it was voluntary. But we all know that everybody had to take the vaccine, otherwise could not travel, could not enter mall, could not go in local trains. Only when the court cases started, they declared that it was voluntary, but in letter it may be voluntary, but in spirit and in practice it wasn't voluntary. So there, besides this, I mean, for all practical purposes, we went for mass vaccination. In fact, the largest vaccination campaign in the world, India, largest lockdown in the world, India. I mean, measures which had no precedence, measures which had no logic. The dubious distinction of being the largest. There are other issues related to mass vaccination, which is coming now. which can lead to vaccine hesitancy among the masses. This is the unfortunate thing. I mean, because this vaccine was given at such a large scale and so many things happened which were unfortunate, which may be coincidental, I'm not saying, but people lose the faith in good vaccines also, genuine, and that's what's happening. People are hesitating to take measles vaccine, people are hesitating even to take tetanus vaccine. This is the unfortunate part. If millions are vaccinated at fast pace with limited resources for monitoring and surveillance of adverse events following vaccination, there are likely to be some adverse events and deaths which may be purely coincidental and not related to the vaccine. Even so, common perception would attribute it to the vaccine, leading to vaccine hesitancy. This would be a setback which would make it difficult to administer vaccine to even the vulnerable when genuinely indicated also. Of course, I said it may be coincidental and people are there to pounce on it, vaccine. But now the situation is more ironical when the manufacturer of AstraZeneca and Covishield, India, they themselves have admitted and they have withdrawn the vaccine. So that raises a question mark. And in European countries and even in UK, the AstraZeneca was suspended early on, particularly in young people, because the adverse effects of myocarditis and strokes, thrombosis was more common in young people. And unfortunately, majority of our people are young, and the vaccine given in our country was AstraZeneca. So this, I mean, we have to be careful in future pandemics. Let us hope that what has happened, and let us hope there is not much. Fortunately, majority did not take booster in our country. So most of the adverse events are more with booster. There's a dose effect relationship as any cause effect association. So 80% Indians did not take a third dose. So that we should be thankful for small mercies. So let us hope that things are not as bad as some of the pessimists would like to say. To practice and follow hard science, what should be done, what we should have done, but at least in future. We should have gone for countrywide sero surveys, and the results were there. Sero surveys in some parts, 80% were already having antibodies in crowded localities. And because the virus is hardly having 3 days incubation period from one person to other, it takes 3 days to, and by vaccine takes a week or 2 weeks and 2 doses to raise the immunity. The natural immunity spreads faster. So trying to vaccinate the mass population when a pandemic is going on, epidemiology makes no sense. Epidemiologically, it doesn't make any sense because the natural infection is going at the speed of a deer in the forest. It is like chasing a deer in the forest. So the vaccine will not catch up. Why you want to duplicate nature's efforts? Best is to, so that if it catches the vulnerable elderly, best is to focus on the elderly, if at all, again, on the advice of the personal physician and informed consent. What is the risk benefit for each individual? That's all. That action we would have saved, and so much of money and resources we would have saved, and perhaps coincidental side effects. We should have refrained from vaccinated those with antibodies. Everybody had RT-PCRs at some time. So anybody with RT-PCR positive could have been waived for vaccination, could have been excluded. And also who has a positive RT-PCR or antibody, somebody had done it. This would have saved a lot of vaccines and resources which could have focused on those who really needed the vaccine, such as healthcare workers, frontline workers, elderly, and people with obesity and comorbidities. To continue the science, okay, let us follow the science. We assume we give vaccine its importance. To continue the science, we could have followed large cohorts who had recovered from past infection to see whether they got reinfected. We could have revised our vaccination policy Guided by science, if we did find an appreciable number of reinfections which were serious enough. In fact, we had followed up in our field practice area, we followed up more than 1,000 people who got COVID in the first wave, and we followed them for till the second wave and beyond, and only 1% got reinfected, and none of them required hospitalization out of 1,000. Just 13 or 14 got reinfection. They were staying in crowded slums in Pune. Similar studies have been done by Cleveland Institute in USA and even in Israel. So they found good robust immunity, and it is known also. It's not a rocket science. The pace in the pandemic was like running a marathon at the speed of a sprint. Everything from the diagnostic test on which so many policy decisions were taken, lockdowns and most treatment regimes and the vaccines developed at warp speed were on emergency use authorization, most unprecedented in the history of public health. This is something which we are so much faith in technology, so much, not only policymakers, the people also. One has to be cautious of unknown things, and we always, even where it was authorized on emergency use authorization. So we have to be cautious and unknown products, and whereas natural immunity is known since ages. The medical consensus reached the last lap of this marathon, or think it has. That is when I wrote this, when the vaccine was marketed, number of vaccines were marketed, mRNA vaccines. In India, we did not have mRNA, but we had, as I said, Covishield and our indigenous product, that is Covaxin. That was the conventional vaccine. Politicians and the public alike think that the vaccines will eradicate the coronavirus from the earth, eradicate. But history of public health does not support this hope. Only one disease, smallpox, could be eradicated more than 150 years after arrival of its vaccine. Smallpox vaccine, after discovery also, it took 150 years, and that vaccine was a good vaccine. I mean, it's not a vaccine which was leaky. And the disease also was peculiar, which could be eradicated, unlike coronavirus. So these were the differences. What was smallpox? It was a disease which required no sophisticated diagnostic test, did not have subclinical or asymptomatic infections, no hidden disease. Cases could be identified and isolated even by the common person, and smallpox virus did not infect animals. None of these criteria apply to the coronavirus. This was written when we assumed, or we took the word of Fauci and his friends that it is from an animal source, wet market. Now there are question mark to that also. Animal reservoir, question mark on whether it has animal reservoir, and now we introduced a new thing, a lab reservoir. We don't know. Some answers we may never have. Given these realities, it is time, as I said, coronavirus does not meet any of the criteria for a disease which can be eradicated by a vaccine which is still new. And now we know the immunity from vaccine doesn't last long. Given this reality, it is time to take pause in this marathon and revise our strategy. This written when this lot of hurly-burly was going on, the battle against pandemic. So I was saying it's time to catch our breath and revise our strategy. Of course, nobody was listening. To revise our strategy based on science and common sense, and not based on tunnel vision of laboratory scientists, however brilliant, and political expediencies. We can add market forces also. Towards this end, an open letter from top scientists in the country published on 29th April asked the government for access to database on COVID-19 testing. A lot of data could be useful for research if we have access. Unfortunately, we do not have. Data captured by government agencies like the ICMR can drive evidence-based public health policy. Data on age, location, health, and vaccination status of everyone who submits a sample for COVID-19 set should be made fully easily accessible. Such data can help prioritize groups for vaccination, help us understand the role of concurrent illnesses, and enable evaluation of the efficacy of vaccines. This was I had written when the vaccines were being rolled out for efficacy. Now there are other concerns, as we all know, whether like AstraZeneca has withdrawn the vaccine, they have stopped manufacturing. Same with Covishield in India. That is the AstraZeneca marketed as Covishield. Now, there are question marks whether any side effects are there, thrombosis and clotting. So again, the same data, if we have a data, because everything has been on digital platform. People got a vaccine certificate, date of vaccine, first dose, second dose, anybody that taken booster. And if it can be linked up and there can be a database of unvaccinated people, if these two groups can be followed forward for short-term and long-term effects of the side effects of the vaccine. So many of the things could be resolved, doubts about side effects, how much, but unfortunately nobody wants to contemplate or many of the scientists and even common people seem to be in denial mode to know the truth. Let us hope, as I said, 80% had not taken boosters, and let us hope all is well. I had to, that's all I had to say in chapter 2 on mass vaccination. Some of the things I have added commentary as the things evolve. Thank you for today.